Hey, Jamie, our fan is here. We've got one fan watching.
Yes. And the intro worked this time.
It
Yay!
did.
We know what we're doing after all.
Hey, good evening. I'm Chad, and this is Jamie, and we are the Paranormal Lens. We're here every Tuesday night, most Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out a time that works, but we're here. Yeah. How's your week going, Jamie?
It is busy, sir. Very, very busy in a good way.
Okay.
So, the same as always, right?
Yep.
Welcome to adulthood. You got things to do and no time to do it in. So,
yep. So,
how about you? What's going on?
Things are busy at work. Families busy. They started play rehearsals and things like that. So,
yes, one more thing to do, right?
It's that time of year. Yep. So yeah. But it is spooky season. There's that. We've got that going for us.
Finally.
So, yep. So, well, tonight I'd like to talk about St Albans Sanatorium.
All right.
You've heard of it, right, Jamie? You haven't been there.
I've not made it there, but I know we've been there as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, this was your first away mission.
That's correct.
Right. Ironically, you're wearing your red shirt tonight in honor of it. Usually the red shirts don't make it back, right?
Exactly. It was an interesting time. I'll put it that way. Had a good team that night. It was, Jerry, Missy, Erica, Tim, Dave was there. Dale and Mallory were with us.
Cool.
Kelly and Flip were there. I think maybe Andy Andrews, maybe a couple other people.
It's an all-star cast.
Yeah. Our Andrew Halderman was there. He had a friend along, so it was a good time. We had a good crew, and got to learn how to do those away missions. So it was fun.
You didn't get beamed up, so
no. And I didn't get lost in the building, which could have happened. It was one of those buildings that just sort of goes, but we'll get into that. I got some ground plans to show and things like that. So,
cool.
So anyway, if you're going to do slides, Jamie, that'd be great.
I'm in it.
Let's go ahead and jump to the first slide. St. Albans Sanatorium. It's in Radford, Virginia. It was a stately building at one time. It's currently owned by Shaw Development Companies, LLC. And on September 22nd, which is this Saturday, it turns into the annual Halloween scare attraction in Radford, Virginia. The rest of the year, it does history tours, paranormal investigations, and all those sort of things. They turn it over to teams overnight. They have their walk around ghost tours. They have their walk around history tours, things like that. I did do the history tour when I went down, so that was sort of interesting to hear them tell the story of what it was. Let's see. It is a let's see. Because of the significance of the local community health and medicine through the years and the grandeur of its architecture, can you go ahead and do the next slide? The property is listed on the Virginia Landmark Register in 2019 and the National Register of Historic Places in 2020. So, believe it or not, this property is claimed to be one of the most active locations on the East Coast. So how did this grand building that you see here turn into this active location and the rundown picture that we saw on the first slide? So as with many of these properties we look at, the tragedy goes back well before the buildings were built. That's the case with St. Albans. If you can jump to the next slide. The building currently sits on a bluff above the New River. As this was the area being settled in the 1700s in Virginia, the native Shawnee and the European settlers clashed over the area. In July of 1755, a group of Shawnee attacked the villagers at Draper's Meadow. They killed at least 5 people and took others hostage. You can go to the next slide. If you're familiar with the story of Mary Draper Ingalls, this is where that happened. She was taken hostage and moved into Kentucky. Next slide. So you can see by this slide, the red line is where she was taken by the Native Americans. So you're talking a big trek away from where she was. Mary managed to escape. She and the woman that's called the Old Dutch Woman worked their way back along the Ohio, Kanawha, and New Rivers towards the English settlements. The two women worked together for 40 days until they had a hunger-induced fight where there actually was talk of cannibalism, apparently, between the two of them. Continued on her own, and after walking nearly 800 miles, she returned to the remains of her home in Draper's Meadow. Neighbors took her in and nursed her back to health, and then she was reunited with her husband and eventually settled near what was to become Radford. So this whole thing happened in this little area as well. If you jump to the next slide. During the Civil War, it is believed that the Union artillery bombarded the settlement of Central Depot from the ridge where St. Albans was eventually built. This was part of the violent Battle of Cloyd's Mountain. It was considered the most significant battle in Southwest Virginia. Apparently, I didn't notice it while we were there, but at certain times you can still smell the gun smoke and hear gunshots if you're visiting St. Albans. So, Central City was incorporated as a town in 1885. In 1887, it changed its name to Radford. There was also a West Radford. These two towns were built on sort of stations of a rail line. The communities merged in 1892, and it put the population of Radford over 5,000 people, which classified it as a city. In 1892, there was also a gentleman named George W. Miles who had a vision of building a new preparatory school. You can jump to the next slide. So he purchased land in January of that year and managed to build the two original buildings and open the school by September of 1892. On opening day, the school had 50 dormitory students from all over the South and 20 to 30 day students from the city of Radford. So it held quite a few students. He named the school after the St. Albans School in England, which was a Lutheran school. Miles built the school around academics, but he soon realized that a successful school needed to have a championship football team and baseball team. Jump to the next slide. He built the sports program up to the point where they were competing with UVA and Virginia Tech because the other prep schools in the area didn't want to compete with them. That's how good they were and the reputation they had. This competitive attitude carried throughout the atmosphere on campus. Stronger boys excelled. Today we would call them bullies, not necessarily stronger boys. The brainy types didn't always do well here. There was a comment in a 1904 yearbook that stated the following: E. Blackbird Runyon did not return after Christmas, much to our sorrow, as it put a stop to the football games on the terrace, in which he figured prominently as the football. So bullying was very prevalent at the school. Behavior at the school was a problem. Drunkenness, vandalism in the town, and abuse of students and faculty by other students were all reported. It is believed that there were several murders and multiple suicides within the student body. So this may have, in part, have led to the closing in 1911. Jump to the next slide. In 1915, Dr. J.C. King purchased the building to convert it into a sanatorium. In 1916, the two original buildings were connected by a narrow quarter in the back of the buildings. Between 1926 and 1954, 3 dormitory additions were added. In 1969, the final addition was added. During Dr. King's tenure, he also purchased about 56 acres of land. The land included a farm with a dairy, hog pens, vegetable gardens, orchards, and a grape arbor. Other buildings included a 1-story servants' quarters, 2 one-story storage buildings, a 1-story machine shed, and a frame stable. The grounds also had tennis courts and croquet courts, and later a driving range along with a putting green on the former front lawn were installed. So it had a little bit of everything. The sanatorium was used for medical and psychiatric treatment up until 1980. You can jump to the next. In 1980, a more modern hospital was built right next door. St. Albans became part of the Carolian health system in the 1980s, and everything was relocated to another site. The buildings and surrounding 78 acres were gifted to Radford University's foundation in 2004. In the following years, the abandoned building was vandalized and became a place for late-night parties and other activities. Finally, in 2008, the original buildings and almost 4 acres of land were sold to the Shaw Development Corporation. I believe this is in part due to Tim Gregory, a former patient at the hospital. His mission was to renovate and transform the buildings into a research and enlightenment center. I wasn't able to find much about Tim or his mission, but he is the one who started the annual Scare House tradition to try to raise money to keep these things going. The newer hospital was kept by the university at that point in hopes of renovating the buildings for residential use. Current searches of the building show a private investigator and the Virginia Employment Commission currently occupying parts of it. So that's pretty much the history in broad strokes. There is tons of information out there, but trying to keep this down to an hour, tried to pare it back. The truth is that the early days of the sanatorium may have been better than when it was a school, but it didn't last like that. In 1945, it is believed that 6,509 people had been treated by a staff of 45 since its opening in 1916. So that's that patient to staff ratio is really low. As we know from other places, psychiatric treatment wasn't really understood, and there was a lot of experimentation that happened. Insulin-induced comas and lobotomies killed people if they were lucky. The unlucky would end up brain dead to have other experiments performed on them. You can jump to the next slide. Up one more. A treatment that was popular for schizophrenic patients was electroconvulsive therapy, or ETC. This shock therapy was deemed safer than insulin coma therapy, but left patients with fractures, severe memory loss, and spontaneous seizures. Hydrotherapies were also used. Now, hydrotherapy sounds like it could be a relaxing soak in a nice warm bubble bath, but it's not. There were several types of hydrotherapy. They included being mummified in icy cold towels, or being strapped into a steaming hot bath, and others were blasted with water from a fire hose. Or, of course, you could go from one extreme to the other as part of your treatment. Go from the icy hot bath and then have the hot water poured in on you. Like we would see it as abuse today. So it's no wonder there's still a lot of energy here. And among other treatment facilities, there was also a drug and alcohol ward as part of this facility. You want to jump to the next slide? My research led me to a very good book written by Pat O'Keefe about St. Albans. It's called The Ghost of St. Albans Sanatorium. She's a paranormal investigator that I actually had the pleasure of meeting last year at the Paravation Paracon in Stroudsburg, Virginia. This book includes the ground plans for the facility in the appendix. So I'm going to go through those floor by floor and then talk about some of the hauntings that she published. So if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide, Jamie. Yep. So this is the sort of the entrance floor. The big conference center to the left is where you set up as your home base for your investigation. The offices are where they have their security, bathrooms, things like that, coffee maker, important part of an investigation.
It's a requirement.
Yep. And then if you go back through where it's labeled long hallway there, that's what goes off to the some of the like electroshock therapy rooms, hydrotherapy, things like that. So that's the next thing. If you want to jump to the next slide, this is one of the hydrotherapy rooms. There were several of these. Our good friend David, you want to guess what he did here?
I know what he did. He's always first into it too.
Yep. He jumped in this tub and sat there for probably a half hour while we investigated. I'll talk a little bit about that more later. If you want to jump to the next slide, this is the electroshock therapy room. So this is where that experimentation would have been done. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. This is just the floor above the that entrance area above the conference space. It's probably what would have been used as bedrooms for some of the staff who would have stayed on site. A lot of the staff throughout the years did live on site. They worked 6 days a week and lived on site in company provided housing. So I found that interesting. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So this is the first floor. As you can tell, it is huge. The section on the left, you can see, was the original dormitory area, the front section of that, but in front of that hallway that cuts across sort of the middle of the page. So that section on the left would have been the original dormitories, and the section on the right at the bottom would have been the original like school area where they would have had the administration and the classrooms and things like that. Then the area that juts out the back, the area that juts out to the side, are all additions that were put on throughout the years. If you go to the next slide, this is the central staircase in the original dormitory unit. And there's hauntings that happen here. There's a woman in white who's known, they believe, is Rebecca, who was in her 20s or 30s. She hung herself in the suicide bathroom, but she's often seen ascending these stairs. So this is a place that you can get a lot of activity. If you want to jump to the next slide, this is the second floor. On this floor are Donald and Jacob's rooms. Donald was an orderly. He was also a pedophile. And Jacob was an 8-year-old boy who they believe that Donald killed, and Jacob's spirit still haunts. Other things in this one is you can see where it says number 7. That's the like balcony area. It's sort of a bird cage, though I have a picture of that coming up. And then I'm not going to go into the details, but number 6 there is the disappearing hallway. That's in Pat's book. So there's some interesting reading there if anybody would like to look at it. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. This is a picture of Jacob's room. Typical when there's a young spirit, investigators bring things to share with him, and they leave them there as trigger objects. So you've got that. Jacob, like I said, was about 8. They believe he was murdered in about 1970. He is known to push people away if they get too close. He's often heard on EVPs, and his presence can be felt by those who are sensitives. Like I said, Donald was a pedophile who was an orderly who they believe to is the one who killed him. If you jump to the next slide, this is what's considered the bird cage, or the that outside roof area. Obviously, to keep patients from escaping, they had to cage it in. So this is where some of the people were kept that were flight risks, that floor. But this was how they could get out and get some fresh air.
Is that a pun? Is that intentional?
Yeah, it was
flight risk.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, it was an interesting area. When we were there, it was April and it was cold. So we didn't spend a lot of time out here. Sure. Unless you needed to get fresh air and fill your lungs with unfresh air. So I'm going to jump to the next slide. This is the third floor. This is where Rebecca's room is. This is where the suicide bathroom is. There's what's labeled as the grieving mother's room. There's also a room on the left that's marked patient's room, sort of there on the front. That room, there's what they call a watcher in there. They don't know if he was like an orderly or what, but people sense that there's somebody in there sort of just watching down that hallway in the women's ward. Sort of an oppressive feeling. The suicide bathroom, there's at least 4 believed suicides that happened in that room. And then Rebecca is a young woman who was in her late 20s or early 30s. She hung herself in the suicide bathroom. The story is she had a baby. Not sure how she was pregnant, how she got pregnant, but she had a baby that didn't survive, but she kept the baby with her for a while. and then when they took the baby, that she committed suicide. This is also the spirit that Dave tried to poke a little bit and was calling her Becky, and we know that his trip home didn't go so smoothly. So we're not sure
what to do on an investigation, right?
Yep. There's a rocking chair in that room that is known to rock on its own. We didn't have that experience, but there is a rocking chair that happens there. So if you want to jump
before we get too far here, sure. Amanda asked it when you were talking about the watcher in the hallway. Mm-hmm. Did you feel him? Was her question.
I did, yes. Okay. It was an eerie feeling. So
okay. Interesting.
That's when I wasn't just beginning and not understanding some of the things I was feeling. So yeah. So we're going to go ahead and jump to the next picture. This is a picture of the bathroom. Not a huge room at all, but that's the bathroom. And then the next one. All right. So this is the basement. In the basement, there are two areas that have things that people notice. There's the bowling alley and the boiler room. The spirit in the bowling alley is named Allie. I'm not sure if that's actually the name of it or they just don't know her name, but Allie is what they call her. It says the sweet spirit was reported playing in the bowling alley by a number of witnesses. Reports of her laughing and giggling are rather common. According to St Albans staff, a police officer had his flashlight lifted out of his pocket in the bowling alley. It scared him so badly that he refused to come back. They're not sure if Allie was responsible for that or somebody else, but he was done. So there's that. In the bowling alley, we had the SLS going, and we definitely caught an image. I think it was with Jerry was sitting in a chair, and there was an image next to him, and or an entity next to him on the SLS. And this went on for a while. I believe that we actually did a Facebook Live session on that one. Around the corner from the bowling alley, number 12, there is the boiler room. Now, this wasn't in Pat's book, but this is one that I remember from being there. There's a man named Red who's believed to be tied to the mechanical room. Sort of his space. He's not happy when people are there, but people leave him cigarettes, to appease him. Some of the videos I was watching and doing research is things are known to have been thrown in that hallway. Like they're not sure where they come from, but it's like you can hear things being thrown, hitting the conduits and stuff like that. There's also, it's coming back to me, but I think there's, rumors of people being killed down there and held there until they were sent elsewhere. But again, that's not, there's a lot of hearsay in these, how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to jump to the next slide, this is a picture of the bowling alley.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So a little 2-lane bowling alley, but it served the purpose. All right, go ahead and go to the next one. All right, so I think that's pretty much all the areas that we have. Just looking through. Yep. So let's see. We covered Jacob, Rebecca, Allie, Red. There's a spirit called the Tall Man, a shadow figure that is especially active on the grand staircase and also seen throughout the building. There's a man named the Tongue Man, who's a usually friendly spirit whose nickname was given because his tongue protrudes awkwardly from his mouth in the fashion of those on heavy psychiatric medication. He is reported to wander throughout the second floor and beyond. Of course, every building like this has to have a growler. A being that growls aggressively at visitors is encountered in the bowling alley and in other parts of the building. A hat man, the shadow being is reported on the second floor near the elevators. very powerful, almost regal. Most who encounter this shadow have a feeling of dread. So this was not the one. This is a different part from where I was at. Again, typical of every building like this, there are the creeper shadows that sort of crawl the walls and ceiling. Those have been seen. The Smiler, an investigator reported seeing this being fall from the ceiling, suspending itself while upside down right in front of a man's face. As if that wasn't shocking enough, the creature flashed an evil grin at him before disappearing once again into the shadows. Confederate and Union soldiers have been seen on the grounds outside. There was an encampment where the one parking lot is on the river side of the building. A lot of ghostly staff and patients are seen randomly throughout the building. There's an older gentleman found crouched in the corner of the file room as if hiding from someone or something. There's a lot of disembodied sounds, shuffling of papers, just like talking, laughing, like people are still there working. The night we were there, it was a little difficult to hear anything like that because the windows are broken. It was cold and it was windy. And there were, things that like were put over windows to try to block the wind, but then they would just bang into the windows to make it, there was so much interference with sound. We couldn't get a lot in those areas. The areas downstairs were a little bit better than that. Then there was another thing called the disappearing doorway. Investigators were in the safe room, a room that housed an old safe. When they got up to leave, the door had disappeared.
Wow.
Is that an urban legend? Is it? So,
well, you said safe room. I was thinking room to get away from the if there would be an episode with the residents,
right,
to be secured away. Okay, not the safe would be in the room. It's
right.
Wait, that's something else.
Yeah. And then the disappearing hallway, again, I'm not going to go into this, but there was this paranormal anomaly was witnessed by Pat O'Keefe and two other investigators on September 27, 2015. The disappearing hallway sort of gives you an idea, but I didn't have time to go dig into it for real deep context. So as you can see, there are many things that happened here. Like I said, we visited April 9th, 2022, my first big investigation with the team. I said April in this area was cold and the facility is not heated. The one room, the office area and our staging room were warm, but everything else was pretty cold. We had some EVPs, definitely heard things in the bowling alley, in the mechanical room, SLS hits in the bowling alley. Like I said, when David was in the hydrotherapy tubs, we caught an SLS action there. I had a strange thing that happened to me. I was using a voice recorder, an EVP recorder for Andrew. And we were down in an area that was called the morgue. I had to throw it in there.
It never gets old.
We were down in the morgue area, which was freaky in itself because it was the morgue. Second of all, there was a storage room right there that was used for their Halloween scare stuff. So there was a creepy clown watching us the entire time.
Of course there was.
And we were doing a session, and I ran my recorder the entire session. We went down to the hydrotherapy room from there. And I went to play back my recording, and my recording was gone. Now, I know my red light was flashing that's saying it was recording. I know I watched, because when you start, you make sure the counter's running, all that.
Yep.
I did all that, but it wasn't there. It's not like there was a silent recording. The recording was gone. And it had been a pretty interesting session, so we were hoping to listen back to it and hear some things. But yeah, never could. So Let's see what on. This is the trip where David had his car accident on the way back. Pretty much a lot of damage on his car. When I was driving home, I felt off too. So I actually decided to come home via Skyline Drive up through Virginia.
Oh yeah.
Stopped and got out of the car just so I could sort of ground myself. Like
Yep.
I felt like I needed to do that, and it helped. But then again, I'm not sure if everything was. I got rid of everything. As I was telling you earlier, Jamie, like I had a hard time putting this together tonight. Like I kept hitting mental blocks. Like,
Yeah.
When we get into this, it's not hard. We get into it, we enjoy it, and but this one was like I can't do it. I really had to force myself.
There's two things to this, and before we get too far away from the experiences, too, I want to show you that Erica brought this point to us as well as another investigator there that night. Something yelled in her ear to get out almost immediately after arriving, and then a tall black mass with her and Flip upstairs looked like the size of a wall. So that kind of fits into the shadow element that you were describing earlier as well. So it's pretty interesting.
I mean, it's a great space. I would love to go back.
Sure.
It's big. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I'm curious because the picture we're looking at is a partial for the size and scale of the place, and it seems obviously it's a little bit sized in to fit, so it's not giving scale. With respects to the frontage of the property, I understand that there's a drop off down to the river, but as far as the other three sides, is there anything in proximity to it? You mentioned there's no heat, so I'm assuming there's no electricity. But is there anything that would give off natural light or artificial light that would create some of the shadow play that's been described? When we're at a place like Booby's Brewery, we're on a municipal street where there's street lamps and traffic, cars going by, so there's lots of shadow issues, especially on the second floor and even in the bar, but in the first floor. But catacombs is a catacombs; it's it's an enclosed space. But so here I can't tell from. I saw the elevated view of it, but I can't tell enough of it. Because when if it's a totally dark space, how are we seeing shadows? That's more of a challenge to see. That makes it more realistic as well, not to have natural light elements where things can be moving outside and creating shadows, or us moving in spaces. We tend to create more things than we think. At times when we're investigating as well, like someone's moving in the room and it's creating a shadow. We saw that from the brewery, with the mirror on the back wall of the second floor at the time a while back that we debunked really easily. Because it was somebody at the front of the room moving by a window, casting a shadow all the way across that long room. So the curious question there, because I haven't been there obviously either.
Right. Let me see if I can share something here.
You mentioned parking lots. So that makes me think there might be lights and stuff, so that's why I'm just trying to understand it better.
All right. So this is sort of a street view.
Okay.
From the highway that's out in front. There's not a lot around it. Like there is like the old hospital's on the one side, but it sits up on this hill on top of this bluff.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of street lights. There's not and once you're inside the building, I mean, the rooms are buried. Like you've got some exterior rooms, but most of the stuff you're in is inside
the building. Right. Yeah. We keep the patients away from the windows and such. I get it for treatment. Okay.
So,
and, I tend to believe more that the claims of shadows and so forth when there's the lack of natural light or artificial light either way. I mean, it could have been a full moon, but if I understand it correctly, it was snowing that night in April. Or flurries and so forth. So it leads me to believe it was overcast, and there wouldn't be, a full moon or something, which would make it a radiant space.
Right. Okay. I mean, you can see there's a couple street lights there, but like I said, not much. A lot.
Okay. So cool. That makes it much more interesting. I mean, it wasn't before, but yeah, the shadow play and the extensive shadows that you mentioned, it's pretty cool. All right. So, the lot of questions that I have, I shouldn't say a lot, I have a couple questions, and the most important one to me is, and I think of this in all of the old buildings we've been in, is there a potential for noise contamination having that many people? There are teams, of course, but there's groups of people moving around the property. We know that, for example, and I don't mean to be negative here, but White Hill, is very old property, and it's got slatted floorboards that are open, and we can see light coming across floors. We hear sounds across the house. Our experience at West Virginia, big open space, even though it's a pretty big building, sound carries there because it's brick or block building with a lot of metal inside, so a lot of echoing.
Right.
Sound carries pretty easily. I'm wondering if that's some of the challenge that you're, with all the audio stuff.
To be honest with you, I would say no, because of the way that they were hospital rooms, and they were individual rooms. A lot of them, like there were some open spaces, but you were isolated in an area to get long hallways separating the different spaces. So you can have a team of 10 or 12 people break up into 3 or 4 groups and go to areas. Yes,
it was.
So you can go to 3 or 4 different areas and be completely separated from people. Like the bowling alley, the staging room was above that, but most of the time when you were in the bowling alley, you didn't have people in the staging room because they were out out investigating. And the bathroom was not above an area that
I know where you're going with this.
But yeah, like I said, things were fairly well separated because of the way it was constructed throughout the years in different sections and corridors connecting them. So, like I said, the noise contamination came from it being open and windy on certain levels. Going up to the room where the floor where Rebecca's room was, you couldn't count really anything up there. As from disembodied voices, we did get some stuff through a either EVP or Phasma box. I remember it was a Jamaican like a Jamaican accent. It was very interesting. But we got that 2 or 3 times through, I think, the Phasma box.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Cool.
So what other questions do you have, Jamie?
Well, it's not really a question, but a comment. And I think it's interesting because we see it everywhere that, this establishment was originally open to the public on a haunt for Halloween, like the scare place. And so many places use this as the primary, the awareness opportunity to get people at the door. Hopefully it's the hook to get them to come back as an investigator or, some other trip later and spend a little more time and obviously invest a little bit more capital to keep the place up and running.
Right.
So which leads me to believe, or when I ask this, I guess, I believe that they're doing this to utilize funds to keep the place available to be open,
Right.
Has there been, in your knowledge, your research or your experience there, is there any capital investments going into rehabbing the place or anything where it could create more, every time there's activity around, refurbishing establishments,
right,
there's the activity draw of, because the place is being changed structurally or physically.
Right.
Any accounts to that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It doesn't. I'm sort of talking out of turn here. It doesn't feel like there's active work going on to restore anything at this point. There's a lot of stuff and I could be completely wrong about that. But there's a lot of stuff that's coming down, areas that are sort of blocked off.
Okay. So it's a decaying property. It
is, yeah, and it's
aging out. Okay.
It was, and I hope they can start restoring it. But with our discussions with Kyle, it is so hard and it takes so much money to get that started.
White Hill, right?
Go through the steps, and so I hope they can.
Time tends to win on these things, and Mother Nature tends to win without an active campaign to bring everything back.
Mm-hmm. One thing I remembered, the woman giving my tour, also does the scare stuff, because it's one of those, you do one thing in those sort of places, you do it all, because you're hooked in.
Yeah.
And she said that she's had people who were on the Halloween event come up to her and say, that couple in that room there, they didn't seem like they were dressed for anything, but what was their sort? And it was like, there was nobody in that room. So these two or three people saw like two people in this room who weren't there. So it's, it's not just investigators, it's other people, going through, seeing it as part of a Halloween hunt. I'm wondering, were the ghosts like, oh, well, we're just going to be part of this too? Or, because I often question that. I'm going to throw this up because this is their advertisement for their thing this year. It is a very haunted, very crazy sleigh house sort of feeling with their stuff. And a lot of, not, I don't want to say making fun of psychiatric patients, but you've got that going on. So how do spirits feel about that? How do, like, when I went to, was it Penhurst earlier this year? I didn't like the feeling that I was getting when they had their Paracon, because it felt, because there were a lot of oddity things there.
Sure.
And I saw people trying on straitjackets and stuff like that, and I'm like, this isn't what the people here who were part of this facility want to be experiencing, is watching people putting on straitjackets, and so
it's trauma,
right. So you have to question what you do at some of these things. Like, and I know Penhurst does a big haunted house thing as well. So it's just but they did tell me that they are very cautious of where they do the haunted house thing. They do it in their admin building. They don't take people out into anything else that would have been patient facilities, which is sort of being respectful.
Yeah.
But
yeah, of course.
It's
like read the room kind of thing. Have some respect.
Yeah,
that's kind of one of the basics of being a paranormal investigator is respect the space and respect the spirits.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that you have to do things to keep these places running. There's electric bills, there's taxes, there's utilities, things like that. They're minimal at
maintenance.
Best, maintenance. And the idea of trying to restore it, and so I think it's great that they do things to keep the money coming in, but I think you have to balance that and make sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, so it's got to be appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I agree with that completely, and that's there's enough outside attractions too to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Here in our area, we have Field of Screams and Jason's Woods, and there's enough. I think over at Mingus Mills, they still do the Haunted Mill, which is not far, just heading your neck of the woods growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a season, for all of this, and they'll last through, now through early November. But what happens after that is, the need to keep income coming through all year long is why it's great to see that they have paranormal programs. And they're good intended programs, but they're not trying to scare you. And it's legit like this. There's and we've said this before, and I really mean this too. If there's an opportunity, if you're going to do an investigation at a location, get there early. Get there the day before if you can, so you have the day of, and take the daytime tour. Get a lay of the land, get a feel for the place, get the words. Get the official word from the host of the space, whatever that is, whether it's a docent, whether it's the owner, whatever. And that makes the investigation. You have a plan for the investigation, right? But it makes the investigation go a lot smoother because you know where you're going. First of all, because then it's dark and everything looks different. But also you have a better idea for what might be there other than what you've read on the internet. Because that's really our research, right? We both were joking a week or two ago about, if somebody were to look at our search histories, for all the stuff we look up for these episodes, it's kind of crazy. but we're relying on that, and that's not always a true thing. Like, it's not always a factual thing anyway. It's an opinion, and a lot of times, especially when things are posted. So the place is the source, and I rely on a host site more than I will reviews of a place or opinion and so forth. So getting there and getting the lay of the land is critical.
This one was definitely different in the daytime than it was at nighttime.
Sure, and they all are, right? I mean,
this one was so sprawling, like
the size. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And now again, we were there in April, but there were still areas that were set up as the haunted attraction. Like they just, it's like, well, that area is off limits. That's set up for the haunted attraction, and that's sort of like.
Well, that's the Sugar Shack at West Virginia, if you recall. That there was over on the coming into the space to the hard left. That wall had a kind of a gated door that we clearly see that the Halloween attraction was set up in that space, because that room continues. I mean, that's the basement space across the whole JK block. That's continuing there. So it's just as much down there as it is the room we were in, which was quite large.
Right.
So I get it. And sometimes it's just easier to leave it than it is to tear it down. You've done the work you continue to do in the entertainment field. Sometimes it's just easier to leave it than it is to tear it down and bring it back up again.
Exactly.
Just for lack of losing anything or the available staff or whatever it takes. So I don't fault that. It's just it's an interesting thing when you keep running across it, though.
Right.
Like areas are cordoned off just because of that. That could be, and this is a conversation that we had with Kyle after Whitehill. In the basement when you go back past the boiler to the former wine cellar space, there's a stairwell still there that goes up. It's off limits, and granted, I understand why, but I said if I was a spirit, I would want to go there when someone comes to the house because I know no one can go up there. The same thing with these cordoned off spaces. I would drift away if I didn't want to be bothered. And especially when we're all, hopefully someone the group is experienced where they're not just keep asking like a trained SEAL to keep doing tricks.
Right.
You're intentionally making good faith contact. Instead of like, show me a sign you're here. Like, come on.
Right.
And no, I'd walk away from that too.
Yep.
It's just not cool.
So, I do want to point out that St. Albans also does a Paracon.
Okay.
So there's another way that they're getting people and finances and a lot of people through, because they are a draw. And I think I haven't been there obviously for it. Last year it was in April, end of April, so it was probably a little better. But
it was 80 then, sure.
Yeah. But like I said, there is room. There is definitely room to spread out and do a Paracon like that, because some of these places, like I know we've talked about trying to do them at Boobies. That would be next to impossible, because you'd be on top of each other, and trying to get people through would just be.
Yeah, it's a little tight.
Yeah. So okay. I agree with Tim.
Tim says we got to go back, so that makes it official.
Yep.
All right. I don't think I have much else. Obviously I wasn't there, so
Right.
I'm jealous of all y'all for going. The stories after were all basically the same. The collective reveal part of it, and it's interesting. That there were some negative issues coming home from the space as well. Dave had a pretty significant fender bender.
Mm-hmm.
Put his car out of commission for quite a while. Your issue of pulling over and grounding. Thankfully you're aware of how to do such things and the need for it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder how many people walk away from these kind of events and opportunities and carry stuff with them. We try to cut ties, and how important we talk about that at the end of public investigations, the importance of it. But how many of us really always remember to do it too, because we're busy packing up, we're trying to talk through some plans for future stuff, we're commiserating, because we don't see each other all that often. And when we're there at an event, we're working, for lack of a better way of saying it, so we're on point throughout it. And we finally get to relax at the end, and it's late on a night, a Saturday night kind of thing. And we're just not our sharpest at the end of the events. And, sometimes I admit it, I'm 3/4 of the way home when I remember to do it, but I still do it in my car.
Right.
So, it's just, I wonder how many times that gets left and we carry something home. And I'm under strict orders not to bring anything home with me. So, so I value my own space.
So,
well, anyway, so congratulations for getting there. Very cool for surviving your first away mission. I'm happy you made it. Worst case, we have to go back and do it again.
Yeah.
And I'll be in. So,
yep. Well, it looks like Amanda and Kelly want to go. So,
yeah. Well,
definitely
road trip.
Yeah.
So where is in the world of the East Coast? Where is Radford, Virginia, proximity?
It is. I knew you were going to ask this. I should have been better prepared.
Was it Eastern Virginia, Western, not West Virginia, Western Virginia, Central?
I think it's more Western Virginia. I was going to pull a map up, but I turned on Street View, so it had. It's actually down below West Virginia. So it's how
South Virginia, the new state of South Virginia. Okay,
it is southwestern Virginia, not the whole way over to the west, but it's it's
somewhere off the 81 corridor. So
yeah, right on the 80. It's right off 81.
Okay.
So how it cuts across there. It's right off 81.
Traveled it many times.
Yep.
8 or 9 hours. Amanda.
6. 6 from Lancaster.
You can be in Indianapolis in 9 hours, or beyond, actually. Myrtle Beach. I'm kidding, but these drives, the drive there is never that bad. It's the drive home,
right?
After being up all night and maybe a little bit of sleep. Hopefully you get it, because obviously, and that's always that's a challenge too. We find hotels after these things, right? But after checkouts at like 11. Right. And you roll in there at like 5 or 6 in the morning, you don't get enough. So, it's always the homebound trip always feels a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've learned on things like this that taking that extra day, especially if it's a Saturday night investigation, taking that extra day and just leaving Sunday afternoon or even Monday morning, it's worth paying for the extra day instead of driving back.
I agree. I've done that. When we were up at Conjuring House, it's an 8-hour drive, give or take. And, we investigated till 4 or 5 in the morning, whatever it was. And I had the room for that night and then the next night. And I just slept through until about 1 or so and 2 in the afternoon. And then got up and came home from there and forego that next night. Yeah. That adds up though, as far as cost. That's the challenge, I guess.
Exactly.
Obviously enrolling in hotel premium points and programs and all that stuff, but and use your miles and your points wherever you can. But this is another way the field adds up, cost wise between equipment and stuff like this. It starts to add in, but the experiences are well worth it.
Mm-hmm. So the question, Jamie.
Well, I know, right? I don't know is the answer.
Right.
I believe everything you've shared with me. I have no reason to doubt you. And, I'm assuming, you trust the author who created the book, Pat, and you've met her and you have some credence to her. I have no reason to doubt that it is. I just like to go and find out for myself.
Well, of course. I mean, here's Amanda's vote.
It with extra D's, it definitely is, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, why not? Let's, I think so. And let's figure out that trip. We are already looking at next year's plans for the team. So let's start thinking about it and get it on the books for sometime after April.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Not July.
Well, it's true too.
July, because again,
the sweet spot. Yeah, well, it's Western Virginia, so it doesn't get as hot there. It's the mountains, but yeah, I agree.
I did find a couple good restaurants while I was down there. Some barbecue stuff.
Was this one of them?
No.
There's a story here, maybe.
I don't remember, maybe, but I mean, there's the story of David's hotel.
Well, yes, I've heard that story many times.
We were staying in hotels next to each other, and David had to check into his hotel by coming to my hotel and getting his room key to go to his hotel, and there was no front desk. We won't go into any of the other stuff that went on.
Yeah, this is why you read the reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prices and everything. Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely have to get a trip scheduled. So
okay, and we'll get the assistant to the traveling secretary.
Uh-huh. Can you, Jamie, are you still there? Can you hear me? Well, it looks like Jamie froze on us. Okay. I don't hear Jamie. I don't know if he's still there or not. But I will guess I'll go ahead and get this wrapped up. Our upcoming events, September 30th, we have a public investigation at Boobies. October 7th, we have a public investigation at Boobies. The 30th is National Ghost Hunting Day. October 14th is the Alpatwitch Festival in Columbia, Pennsylvania. We'll be there all day. Come out and join us. It's usually a good time. The 21st, we have a public investigation at Boobies, and October 26th, we have the Columbia Mardi Gras Halloween Parade. So we will be there in costume, handing out candy. That's always a fun time. If you're interested in any of these events, check out our Facebook page for the link to the tickets. Here is our Facebook page, our TikTok, our Instagram, YouTube, all those things. So yeah, lots to do. I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight, and who is going to be watching us in the future. Yeah, stay spooky. Have a great Halloween season. We'll be back here next week. Jamie will be hosting. He told me that he is going to be doing an episode on a place called, I'm looking for it here, the Mystery Spot in Santa Cruz, California. So something that I don't know much about, so I'm looking forward to it. So see everybody next week. Thanks for watching, and have a great week.